So you just saw this beautiful gameplay from a game called the Immortals of Aveum. Now, this is a game published by EA, you know, the most famous and loved publisher on planet Earth for video games. They just released this whole article all about like the visual things that they've done in this game to make it really, really impressive. A lot of that is built on the back of Unreal Engine 5 and its technology. What confuses me the most that as a developer, why would you make a game that no one can play? You see that even the minimum specs are looking really expensive nowadays. They say that you need an i7 from the 9000 series, which went for about $320 to $330, and this is for minimum specs, low to medium settings at 1080p, 60 FPS. This was an 8-core processor without hyperthreading, so it was just straight up 8 cores. I also said the Ryzen 3700X is another option at that price point. Now for GPUs here, on NVIDIA's side, they say that you need a 2080 Super for minimum requirements, 8 gigabytes of VRAM. And this card is basically at the top end of the Turing architecture. Bought a high-end card back then you could play this game. And then the 5700 XT, which is significantly slower than the 2080 Super, which I don't know exactly why they compare this. You're looking at this for 1080p, 60 FPS, low to medium settings. And then on the recommended side, which is how people would probably want to play the game, you need a Core i7. Nowadays goes for $370 to $380, and it is a 12-core total processor with 8 performance cores, 4 efficiency cores, 20 threads total. Or on AMD's side, they recommend the 5700X, which is pretty affordable nowadays. I really recommend this processor if you're looking at gaming. You get 8 cores, 16 threads, all for a nice low price of $180, so way less than the Intel part. The real thing is to look at these minimum specs. It's even back in Q2 of 2019 when this i7 9700 CPU released. That was a pretty high-end system for the time. And now it's just hitting minimum 4 years later. I know that sounds like quite a while, but it really isn't that long. Now, I did quickly go on PC Part Picker, this amazing website that allows you to build PCs with like prices that are in real time being calibrated. Apparently for the minimum specs to even be able to load the game and get an okay, like kind of decent performance in an FPS game, $900, okay? Now these prices, you can't really buy this CPU anymore. You can't really buy these motherboards for a good price anymore, but I looked them up on the used market and you can get them for about these prices. And then the AMD version with the CPU, again, I took used prices on this. You can get it for about 115, pretty good deal nowadays. And then you can get a B550 motherboard, still brand new, for $100. For both of these builds, I took something in between. So they said that the 5700X was enough for minimum, but and then they said 2080 Super was that. So 6700 XT is very, very close to a 2080 Super. You can see it here. It's just 4% away from it. And that is a new card that you can actually buy. So I went ahead and went with that for both of these minimum builds. Why in the heck is a 6700 XT, which is a pretty powerful graphics card, if you compare it to any other games, if you're playing at 1080p, this card is going to be really fast. Because Immortals of Aveum, it said that they say in other fantasy games where they backed off of some of the detail because it wasn't practical, they said that we chose not to be practical. And if I'm being honest, if you want people to play your game, you should make it practical for people to run.
An explosion of VRAM usage that we have to take into consideration. And if you want the high fidelity, textures and meshes are one thing. If you're talking Lumen, every new feature right now seems to just demand more.
In some ways I can empathize with them. It's like you have this really powerful graphical fidelity technology at your fingertips and you just want to use it in your games. But nothing can really run it. It's like this give and take. Do you use all this technology, but it's not there's no way to optimize it. It's just difficult to run. And then just limit it to your high-end graphics card buyers? Or do you hold back on some of the things that you want to achieve just so that more people can play the game? In my honest opinion, you should make your game so that the most people can play it as possible. It's like making a Crysis. Like, look at this LTT clip where they talk about why the heck was Crysis ever a thing?
The shrinking differences between graphics card generations mean for the future of the market. I mean,
longer upgrade cycles?
Yeah, longer upgrade cycles, and I think a shift from game developers towards targeting a lower spec, right? Like I don't think we're ever going to see a Crysis again. A game developer goes out of their way to create a game that literally nothing on the market can run. Because why would you do that? You'd be so much better off targeting the Steam Deck. Yeah,
like if you look at the super popular games right now,
the word we have for it is esports titles.
Yeah.
It's targeting esports tier. So basically making sure that it can run on anything and then adding some bells and whistles that realistically nobody's going to turn on anyway because they want to compete.
There's also another part of me with developers that are making games like this where it's almost like the graphics are so good that they're tech demos to see what is possible with this current generation of hardware that we have. It's like, are they focusing more on how the game looks or on how the game plays? Because gameplay is king. That's what keeps people coming back to a game. Look at the most played games on Steam. They're very, very replayable games, and they're very, very accessible to a lot of people. There's so many games that just aren't that graphically demanding, yet people play them all the time. Don't get me wrong though, it is really beautiful what we can make games look like nowadays. But games are games. They're an interactive experience. It's not a movie. The 3060 is the most popular card at the moment, then the 2060, then the 1060, and the 3070. The 3070 is only just above the minimum requirements for this game. I don't know how many times I'm going to say this, but why make a game if no one can play it? And they say it's breathtaking. They say it's a fully featured playable experience. And is the gameplay fun? Does it keep you coming back to this game? For me personally, I've never really played a game that was so visually appealing and then actually felt the need to want to come back to it. It's similar to like the Avatar 2 movie. It was very applauded for its visual effects, won awards for that, but it wasn't really critically acclaimed for its story or its impact. Instead, it's just like, wow, this movie looked really cool. About it. I don't know anybody who actually talked about it. I don't know if you can relate to that, and don't get me wrong on that. I think it's still cool that developers do push the limits of what visuals can do. They're not afraid to release a game that not that many people can play. But just know going into it, if you want your game to be successful, you probably shouldn't make a Crysis game that nobody could even touch if they dreamed. There's also the whole question of unoptimized games like The Last of Us, and the fact that Resident Evil 4 Remake crashed if you went over the VRAM limit with ray tracing on. And it's the same story for those games. Why would you make a game that struggles like that? You're telling this impactful story or something, you want to make an impact on the world, what people have seen, but nobody can play it. Now, if you're interested in any of the PC builds that I did show you in this video, I do have the recommended ones as well if you're curious. The recommended builds would go for like $1,100-ish, and these are all brand new parts. If you're interested in any of these, I'll leave these in the description. I think they're great value because these systems, even this minimum one, can destroy games at 1080p, and most people are playing at 1080p. And all used prices that I have on here was just found on eBay, buy it now. So it's not complicated. Making games like this is just probably a bad idea. That's all I got though. See you guys in the comments. See you in the next video. Peace.